All right, what up, everyone? Jon Mosales here, Friday afternoon. I got my new guy, Big Loaf, on. We're going to be talking best ball. We've been doing some intro to best ball. I've had Anthony on. We've done a couple best ball live drafts, getting everyone. Now we're doing the level up. We're skipping small talk. We're going straight to medium talk. Big Loaf is a best ball aficionado. What would you say your title is?
Best ball spreadsheet maximalist.
Okay, that's even cooler. Yeah, you're partnered with Underdog, established the run. I mean, you're locked in. For I guess first, what Hey, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, brother. I appreciate
um, so let's. How many best ball leagues do you do?
it. Last year I did around 220, and just to put this out there, I have buddies that have already done like 1,500 drafts, so I'm definitely on like the lighter side there. I'll probably get somewhere close to 300, the 400 last year. The reason I had 230 last year is because you know how it is when you do content that takes away from you doing actual fantasy stuff for yourself, and all the hours I put in, I was just like, I got a max BBM or something to like justify this time sink. So like in a perfect world, like that money spread out across more individual teams than it was last year. But like I was just rushing to get volume down towards the end because I spent way too much time on the content side of things.
Okay, getting doing the prep, and then yeah, you want a bit of a payoff. That makes sense. We got 100 things to go into, but so let's do seasonal or time wise. When's the best time? Like you said, you went in late. Is that when most people are going? Like, where's the best edge, right? Because we had the schedule that just come out. That's a big edge. We had the NFL draft, right? That changes a lot.
Yeah, so like I would say the edge is all like kind of depending on what type of contest you're doing. So like the earlier you get in the contest, the better off you probably are, just from like especially in like the playoff pod ones, because like ADP changes so much, and there's values that you could get, the first day BBM that you can't even get today. Like Travis Hunter was going like, 80, 90, somewhere in that range. Maybe like 60s, but like lower than the 30 that he's going now. So that's the biggest edge there. What I like to do is like in multiple contests get dropped throughout the year that aren't the flagship ones that are referred to as time box, which like basically those will close in like a week or two. So anytime those ones come up, I really like targeting those because you're not really in danger of like, unless someone gets hurt or something, of like having a team that's going to crush you on closing ADP value just because there's such a limited time window of the draft. Whereas like BBM opened 2 weeks ago and it won't close until, like a few days before the season starts if it doesn't overlay a little bit this year.
Okay, so you're saying like, what's a good comp from last year? I'm just thinking. I guess, I mean, CMC that was week one, but yeah. So like maybe or Hollywood, someone like you like
Yeah,
Hollywood Brown
yeah.
a lot. Then he's out, and then all of a sudden that changes, and your teams with Hollywood may be screwed. But he was still going like 80th or something.
And it didn't really matter, but like Samaje P. Ryan getting traded to the Chiefs, like that ended up being a nothing burger, but like that was one. And then Elijah Mitchell getting hurt, so you got really good value on Jordan Mason. Like those are a little bit, those aren't extreme examples. Like I wouldn't worry about having to take a guy at 150 compared to 220. I don't think there's a huge difference there. But like if someone goes from 60 to 25, like yeah, you're losing. You're definitely losing a lot of value. Not Rasheed Rice. I think that's the best example.
Oh, right. That's perfect. That's perfect, right? We thought he'd be suspended. It gets put off, and yeah, he was, and then he tears his ACL week three, so it didn't even matter. So what's some like we've done the best ball beginner stuff. People caught up. So what are some mistakes people make when they just start jumping in and be like, hey, I'm gonna be a best ball guy. I'm gonna do 50 leagues versus where maybe 10,000 hours things mistakes you've already learned from.
All that question is kind of dependent on what like
Everyone is.
platform you're playing on, but we'll just stick with Underdog. I
Yeah.
think that's where most people get their volume down, where most of your viewers are probably playing, so we'll just stick with that. I think the biggest mistake people make jumping into Underdog specifically is they do not allocate enough of their draft capital to wide receivers, because once you get to like the pod weeks, where you have to finish first out of 12, first out of 16, and then hopefully first out of like 500 people to win like the grand prize. You need your wide receivers to have like a really good ceilings, especially those like first 2 weeks where you're trying to get to the finals. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of like maybe going to running back heavy or to quarterback or really any other position and just under allocating at wide receiver. And like that's really I think like the biggest like thing that'd be the first thing I tell anyone starting on Underdog is like you need to invest an appropriate amount in wide receivers. What does that look like?
Answer your own question, Bert.
Yeah, I would say so through top 100. That's what let this about 8 rounds. We'll say. I think by time you're leaving the top 100, you should probably have 4 to 5 receivers, and I also think 3 of those receivers should probably be picked in the first 6 rounds, but even preferably 5, just because you know how it is. Like zero running back, a running back could step up into the guy in front of him's position. If he goes down, it doesn't work. It doesn't work that same way with wide receivers. Like if Malik Neighbors goes down, I love Darius Slayton, but that's not going to make Darius Slayton start doing Malik.
Yeah, or even Wandale. Okay, so let's talk about that for a bit. So is that year specific, or because last year a lot of wide receivers went down, right? All right, Brandon Ayuk went down, Nico went down, Chris Olave went down, Tyreek had a bad season because historically wide receivers are more healthy, or is that just because it's three wide receivers versus kind of two running backs?
Yeah, and it's also the wide receivers just have like a higher like point ceiling, but good running backs have the higher floor. And so like the way I kind of view it is like, because I don't get me wrong, I'm not a zero RB bro. I like if you're gonna give me Joe Mixon in the 5th round this year, I'm gonna take Joe Mixon. But like the issue is like we'll just use Jordan Mason. I know it didn't happen at the same time. It's like you got Jordan Mason in the 16th round, and then CMC's out and he's the starter. You spent 4th round on Joe Mixon. Both of them have similar projections, but the one guy got that similar projection from the 16th round, whereas you had to pay the 4th round for it. And Mike Evans was around, I think maybe second. We'll just say he's a 3rd round pick, and so like a 16th round wide receiver. Like I don't think Elijah Moore is capable of the weekly ceiling that Mike Evans is, but if any running back could step into a starting role, they're capable of basically anything outside of like that Barkley, Derrick Henry, CMC tier, I would say.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So then, what about the Brian Thomas Jr., right? If you got him, were you pretty much guaranteed the money? Puka the year before. Is there more value on shooting the moon on these wide receivers because of the 1 in 1,000?
Yeah, I like the rookies this year. Like I think most people are in agreement that the skill position class outside of running back was not nearly as good this year as it was last year. But like I think Brian Thomas is a good example of like like that's like the unknown factor there. Like, do I think Trey Harris is going to be like a top 12 wide receiver? No, I probably didn't think Brian Thomas was going to be last year either.
Yeah.
But the difference between Trey Harris and who else is going in that range right now? We'll just say
Higgins, Burden, if we're talking rookies.
Yeah, we'll say Burden. Is that like we don't know what he can do. We don't know what he's fought, which Underdog makes you pay for that more than any other platform. There's definitely a rookie premium there. But that's kind of the upside of the rookies. Like, yeah, the floor could be a lot lower than you want it to be, but the ceiling is higher than like more established guys. Like Bateman had a great breakout year last year, but there's no world I think where Rashad Bateman could be a top 12 fantasy wide receiver. And I'm not saying Trey Harris can, but that's the allure. We don't know.
Yeah.
So you should be trying to stay ceiling.
Okay, so let's let's talk your weight so far that you've done. You said you've done how many teams already so far?
I think I've done 11, which like I can't remember if this is the pre-show or post-show where I said it, but like I spent a lot of time on like content, so it's hard for me to get the volume down early. But I've also wanted to wait until after the draft. There was pre-draft contests, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. But I wanted to see where guys landed and finish up like my projections before I really dug into anything.
Yeah, it's still so early, right? This is just we just like to get some stuff out there and it's fun. But so let's talk early rounds. Ideal spot. Where would you want to, if you can pick where you go and where are you thinking? So from what I'm hearing, I think maybe you want to go end of first, right? And then go wide receiver.
Last year was brutal. The talent drop off, and not only like what you got at the end of the first round, but going into so if you picked 12 last year, like I know you could have taken Nico Collins or Derrick Henry, but we're just going based off of like ADP.
Yeah.
The projection drop off that like the guy who picked second got with his second round pick compared to your 13th overall pick, there wasn't a big gap there. So there a lot of early picks busted last year. That's just how it plays out. But process over results type of thinking. The end of the rounds were brutal last year. This year it seems a little bit more spread out, but I like the 4 to 8 range just because it lets you take advantage of ADP fallers more than the first, like the early and the late end does, just because you only have, three, like either 1 to 4 picks between your next pick. And it's like, not a lot of value really has the chance to open up there. Whereas like when you're in the middle round, you're always live to catch a faller. And I think it allows for more flexibility as well.
Okay, cool. Who is there anyone that jumps out right away? Just like because I've been doing a little like just how much does injury risk and floor ceiling come in, right? Whereas like Puka, right? His target share is crazy, but he seems like gets hurt a lot, right? You got Tyreek, you got the wide receiver age cliff. We got all these different variables versus maybe like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who doesn't really have the highest ceiling, but his floor is kind of the ceiling.
Yeah, for the early picks, like if you really don't like somebody, like whether like that's just your personal take or the projections you made or the projections you buy don't like him, I'm okay with hard fading there. And then the inverse, like if you really like a guy, I'm okay with being overweight, which for reference, 8% is the average ownership a player would have because there's 12 teams. So if the player gets drafted 100% of the time, it's 8%. So if you're below 8%, you're below the field. If you're above 8%, you're above. I mean,
I like that.
if we're just being honest, we all know that like if you had a top 5 pick last year, the correct thing to do is just take Jamar Chase every single possible time that you could have taken him. But again, I try to be process over results. What I like doing with the early guys is if there's someone I like more than someone else, I'll like bump up someone else's exposure and lower the guy I don't like. But like they all go that high for a reason. Like this ADP like on Underdog is market driven, so like it's determined by thousands, hundreds of thousands of drafts. So and I respect for the market's ability to determine like how good a guy is. They get things wrong, but at least on the early end, they know where fantasy points come from. So for there, I like being a little flatter. I'll be like 12% on one guy, 4% on the other, and some of it just comes down to what draft spot I get more often than not.
Who were you the highest on last year? Was there anyone where it's like, yo, that's the guy, I'm taking him every time?
In the first round,
First couple, first three, first four
I
rounds.
would say AJ Brown was probably the highest because
Oh.
he was the last guy I felt that was like really worth a first round pick with what he brought to the table. I didn't like Garrett Wilson. I didn't like Breece Hall. 2 Jets going in the first round. Who could have guessed that would have went wrong? My buddy
Yeah.
Nick in the chat, like he argued against that. And sometimes the best thing to do is just use common sense. And there was no world where 2 Jets were paying off. And I mean, you ever watch football in your life? The Jets. You know what they do.
But it's funny though, if I told you that Aaron Rodgers was going to play 17, Wilson and Brees were going to play, I think, around 17 games, and I've been like, okay, I'll sign me up for that. But then it's just classic Jets.
Oh. That's what they do. But so I like taking my stands like with like lesser draft capital, which like I won't. You can have me back on. We can go to the high level of that about like what each pick is actually worth from like a draft capital perspective. Because going up,
I was just on your Twitter thing. Yeah, ADP versus draft capital. Honest, I couldn't gauge it right away. So
the simplest example is just that Calvin really one. I said he goes pick 55. I have him ranked 45. Dontavian Wicks goes 206. I have him ranked 154. And for like that's like the 5th round for Calvin really moving up 10 spots of ADP from the 5th round to your ranking being like late early 4th compared to 200 to 50. That's a bigger deal. Like that's more expensive. Honestly, after like pick 140, 150, I don't really think you have to care about as ADP as much anymore. All those picks are like basically equal value, but there are better guys there. But in terms of like actual impact on your team, there's not going to be a ton. But like those, that's where I like taking stands is like, after like that 4th, 5th, like if I really like a guy in the 3rd, I'll be heavy there. But after like that 4th, 5th round is where I'm okay. Like, all right, like I'm willing to be 3x the field on a guy, and I'm willing to like, eat the risk that comes from that. But like, when Jamar Chase is like the most expensive guy, like if I got the number 1 pick every time this year, if I did 500 drafts and I got the number 1 pick 500 times and I knew that was going to happen, I would still probably only have like, I love Jamar, so like 16%, but like,
16 of the 100. So
yeah, but logic would dictate you should probably take him 100%. But like for there, like your risk of if he goes down, like your most expensive pick that you own gets hurt, it's hard to recover from that.
Or Burrow, or even maybe it's week 15 in Philly and they're double teaming him and bad weather, right? And that makes sense. So let's talk stacks. I remember I was on I found you on Reddit, and then there was all these stack correlation. Again, I didn't really get it right away. So let's talk value of stacks, stacks you like? Which end of the stack's more valuable? Just take me through the whole process.
So for the reason that like stacking works, I'm not sure how much of the audience plays like DFS, but if a quarterback throws for 3 touchdowns, his receivers are probably going to catch 2.5 of those, and the running back will catch 0.5. So if you like a quarterback, it's also good to like his wide receivers for those weeks where you need to finish first out of 12, first out of 16, and like one out of we'll just say 500. I know it's higher than that, but I'm tired of like not knowing what the number is off the top of my head. So it's better for your like weekly ceiling if for the stacks. It's also worse for the floor, but like with best ball, you don't really want to play for the floor. You should be attacking everything from the angles. Like the picks I'm making are correct. You don't want to hedge against yourself. So like that's the logic there is like it increases your ceiling. And if you have Joe Burrow, you should want Jamar Chase and T Higgins in a vacuum, which leads me to like, okay, so like how would you go about doing that? There's different versions of it. I think a lot of it comes down to how much the stack cost as well. I want to say the Burrow, it's either the AJ Brown, Smith, Jalen Hurts, or the Burrow and Higgins and Chase stacks are the two most expensive. But like that's where I don't love it as much. Like I love the ceiling there, but that's a lot of draft capital.
That's your whole load, right?
Yeah, I would say like I don't have the number off the top of my head, but like your total draft capital that you own based on what pick you get, I would say you're probably spending 30% of it at least on those guys. And that's a big commitment, especially when there's other stacks you could get later down the line. I'm not necessarily a stack maxi. I don't stack maxi. Like I don't like try to do it.
Okay, cool.
Every single time, but like if you can get it and you like those players, I think you should. But I'm almost positive the BBM winner didn't have what they would classify as a real stack last year. And I think a stack could be like multiple things. You don't necessarily have to have the quarterback. I think if you have a running back and a wide receiver on the same team, I think that's the stack. If you just have the wide receivers, that's a stack. You have a wide receiver and a tight end, so on and so on. I've found that you have to sacrifice a lot of value to get the stacks because like there's like, I don't necessarily like Luther Burden more than I like Rashid Shaheed, but like to say I have Caleb Williams, like, the stacking logic would dictate you should take him. So what I kind of have gravitated towards more recently is rushing quarterbacks because you don't have to necessarily do it with them because they create their own floor and ceiling on the ground. And so you're not reliant on a pass catcher. Whereas like if Joe Burrow has a ceiling week, Jamar Chase or T Higgins or one of those two at least are going to eat. So like it makes it hard to justify taking Joe Burrow as like the quarterback you're relying on for the playoff pods when you don't have his main stacking weapons. Yeah. Whereas if you take Lamar, I think you could get away with taking like literally nobody on the Ravens pass catchers. And then you can make wide receiver or running back wide receiver stacks with other teams.
Yeah, we'll keep on this. So what about the QB running back stack with a running back quarterback, right? The Josh Allen, James Cook, the Lamar, Derrick Henry, Hurts, I guess Bart, is there value in that where it's like, I'm just going to get all the rushing touchdowns. And then, maybe the ceiling's a little off, but you get these teams get 3-4 rushing touchdowns a game.
If I ever take the same quarterback and running back from the same thing, I don't even view it as a stack necessarily. It is on like the technical like side of things, but like I wouldn't view it that way. But if I'm like stacking for like the purposes like I want a ceiling in the playoff pod weeks, I'm probably not going to like intentionally attack that. Like if I take Josh Allen and James Cook, I'm probably going to build like a different pass catching stack elsewhere. Yeah. I think attacking like from that angle, I think that would be good for the total points where it's like, cumulative throughout the whole year. But when like it gets to weekly ceiling part of it, I think you're going to be hard pressed for your main stack of a quarterback and a running back to be what beats 12, 16, and 500 people back to back weeks.
So let's talk about building versus what are you going for? Are you building? Let's just stick with the weekly. Not the total points format, right? The normal underdog. Are you trying to, when you draft, trying to get into the week 15 format or trying to win week 17?
See, that this is definitely the hot topic debate within the best ball community.
No
my answer is probably a cop out, but I do think there is a middle ground to it where like some people, maybe they take like they'll take Joe Mixon, but then they don't take another running back until like that Zach Charbonnet, Najee Harris tier. So they'll be like, hey, like if this team can advance, I have good zero running back targets. My wide receiver room's loaded. Hopefully that could be good for the playoffs. Where what I honestly find the best thing to do is you could start one quarterback a week. You could start up to 3 running backs if they could hit the flex, up to 4 wide receivers if they hit the flex, and 2 tight ends if you hit the flex. I think logic just dictates that you should use your most valuable draft capital to attack the positions that you have to start the most of every week or could potentially start the most of any week. So like I think if you know, for the first 8 rounds, if you know, I'm not going to fault you for taking Lamar or Bowers or something, but if you go 7 out of 8 of those picks are wide receivers and running backs, 2-5, whatever, I think that helps you for the advancement side of things while also helping for the playoff pod. But if you're playing for advancing, I definitely have a preference towards the stud running backs, and not even just stud is like Saquon. I mean, like a guy that's going to get 60 to 70% of his team's volume. Like if he could stay healthy all year, there's a decent chance that a running back that got 68% of his team's volume is going to outscore Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle.
So what's the floor of that running back tier? Like Chase Brown?
I think it goes deeper than that, man.
Rico Dowdle?
Here, I got my rankings pulled up.
Let's right.
Let's see what my actual take is there. Now there's some dudes outside of there. I would probably say after James Conner is when it starts getting a little murkier because that's Quinshawn. Like, this is by ADP, so that's like Quinshawn Judkins after him, Montgomery, Caleb Johnson. But there's also guys who I think could get that type of workload after that, like Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift, Brian Robinson. My hot take would be I actually think Tyrone Tracy's good. But yeah, after I'd say about that James Conner tier is when that starts falling off. But everyone above him, outside of like maybe Amarion Hampton, because I think Najee's going to get a little bit more work than people think. I think every single one of those guys are going to outscore. Like, I'll stick with Devonta Smith this year. And by that, I just mean wide receiver 2s. Expensive wide receiver 2s.
Okay. So let's come back to stacks. I love talking stacks. Is there one you like? So the Chase Burrow is just a super stack. Both ends are elite, right? But you don't get that all the time. Like, let's say Malik Neighbors and whoever the Giants QB is, Justin Jefferson, the rookie, versus maybe Josh Allen and Khalil Shakir, right? Is there one end you want to target more? One has more value, or one, or is it easier to build if you go one way first?
I think part of it is also letting the lobby dictate what you're doing. Like, I don't think you should ever go into a draft with the thought mind like, this is my Josh Allen, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid stack. Like, if you try to force it, like, you're not going to take what the room gives you. And I think like that's a big part of drafting, is taking what the room gives you. For the Bills specifically, I don't like them just because like that ball's so spread out. Like, I think only the Commanders distributed the ball to more players last year than Buffalo did. But for stacks that I like that are on like the cheaper side of things, I'm scrolling through here. I think some of these teams you could get away with like out having the whatever. Like there's a world where you don't need Jamar Chase in the Joe Burrow stack. Like Gesicki can end up catching 1, and T Higgins gets like 2, and Jamar only gets like 10 and 100, which is good. But if you don't score a touchdown on underdog, that's hard. But I probably like attacking like the cheaper stacks. So I think Denver's a good example. Bo Nix isn't expensive. Cortland Sutton's not expensive. Evan Ingram's cheap. Don't ask me who the wide receiver 2 on that team is. I have no idea. But I'd like Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton, and Evan Ingram, I think, is like a good example of like you don't have to overpay for anything. There's like a viable ceiling there and like a real path for that being optimal. And then I would say the Saints. If I had to give my favorite, I would probably say the Saints, just because I think they're ridiculously cheap. Rashid Shaheed's probably my favorite value wide receiver on the board right now.
But even the QB, what's it, Stroh, the 28-year-old or whatever?
Tyler Shuck, yeah. No one has anything bad to say about him but his age. Like, you know, if someone starts getting to me about like, hey, like he didn't, you know, his progressions were bad. He doesn't have zip on the ball, which he does have some zip. He can make athletic throws. They took him in the second round. My hot take is I think the Saints were kind of aware at the very worst that Derek Carr was live to retire this year. So like they took that kid, and they had, I think, with the idea of like he's going to be the week 1 starter. He could very well suck. But that's the thing about like, you know, fantasy is like we don't have to care as much about the actual like game part of it. It's just the stats, which are not real football. Stats are not real football. He just needs to go out there and their defense isn't good. He has Kamara, and I'm iffy on Olave, but like he's at least above a league average wide receiver, and I really like Rashid Shaheed. So he has weapons, and he has a bad defense that's going to make him throw more often. I think I think every Saint is undervalued, and I also think like Juwan Johnson's probably my favorite value tight end. So
Okay.
like I'm real big on the Saints at current cost right now.
I mean, yeah, I just did a tweet about because my whole thing is find that offense that was incompetent, no one expects anything of, and all of a sudden, right? We had the Bucks 2 years or 2 years in a row, Seahawks 2 years ago, Commanders last year. You get all these guys for free. They blow up into a top 5 offense, and it's just like you're raking it.
Yeah, and even with where the Saints are going now, like I have them. Let's see, I have the Saints as the 32nd, 3rd, 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25th. It's the 23rd highest fantasy producing team right now. So that's not even that bold. I think they're like, bottom quarter of the league, but like at the higher percent of the bottom quarter, 23rd. And like my projections just love every Saints guy. And that's only with them being 23rd. So like, people were treating them like they're going to be the worst offense. I'm treating them like they're going to be the 23rd best offense. And my projections are in love with them.
Yeah, they're in love with them in terms of versus draft capital, right? ADP versus draft capital.
Yeah. Like if Rashid Shaheed was going at pick like 80 instead of 115, and Olave was going at pick like 30 instead of pick 50, I would not like them nearly as much.
Yeah,
my projections would not like them nearly as much.
So what do we do with teams with these if an offense you might like, but they've got this shitty QB room, right? Because it might be I'll never remember. Had Stroh?
Shuck, which I can't fault anyone for not defaulting to that.
Right? It might be Shuck, but it might be Rattler. I really liked Rattler last year. He didn't show that much. But do you take both? Same with the Giants, right? If you love Neighbors, are you taking Russ and do you take Jameis in case, who knows?
That kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier of like, which we could talk about the difference between best ball and redraft soon. But you want to treat your best ball teams like they're good, like you're making the best decisions. So like I think a good example of this instead of the quarterback would be like, oh, you took CMC, you think you should take Isaac Guerrero, which like I understand like, logic X leading the logic Y there, but like what you need to consider is, well, someone who didn't take CMC and then this where he got hurt, that didn't take him also got Isaac Guerrero,
and didn't have,
and then he also still has his first round pick or second round pick that you don't have. So, like, I don't like hedging for that reason because there's going to be way better Guerrero teams than the CMC Guerrero team that you have in the world where CMC goes down.
I love this. This is great. So, yeah, that's the thing, right? So, what about with handcuffs? So, like, right, yeah, the CMC Jordan Mason, but does that apply with, like, Gibbs and Montgomery? Because if you take, right, if Gibbs gets hurt now, Montgomery's a superstar, but it costs you Gibbs.
I think that depends on both of their standalone projections. So I think Hampton and Najee Harris is a good example. Like they're both going to get volume to start off. So I have no problem. Like I probably would lean towards not taking both, but like the fact that they're both getting volume makes me more okay with like, hey, like, it's not like Najee's going to do nothing or Hampton's going to do nothing until the other guy goes down. So for those dudes, like I would still shy away against taking both of them, but it's a lot more viable. But like in terms of handcuff, I think you should only do it if like going into week 1, it is very clear that both of these guys are going to have a role initially. Like Gibbs and Montgomery, I think is probably the best example. Najee and Jalen Warren last year. But when it's like, a CMC to Guerrero, a Derrick Henry to Justice Hill, and a Saquon to Will Shipley, I don't think you should take both of them because like that team is so reliant on Derrick Henry and them being like good, and someone's going to have Will Shipley on a non-Saquon team. So I think you're fighting way too much of an uphill battle trying to like plan for the fact that Saquon might get hurt.
Okay. This is honestly, you're dropping lots of knowledge here. So anyone watching, make sure check out our Discord, right? Sportitos. We got on Twitter. We'll be dropping our draft guide sometime in June. Big Loaf's vaping and dropping knowledge.
I'm hiding it because YouTube doesn't like when you do that. It's paraphernalia, so like they won't see it. You could say the word, but I hide it so that their algorithm doesn't pick up on them doing that.
Okay, so best ball versus redraft, right? You touched on that a little. So what are some of the big differences? Because I think people probably just think it's a nice overlap.
Yeah, so for like on the redraft side, if you take Saquon, I'm absolutely willing to take Will Shipley there. That's a little bit different to me because like he just slots right in. You're also the only guy with Derrick Henry in your redraft league. There's not 116 other thousand teams that also have Derrick Henry in this world, or like 60,000, a lot. So I'm okay with it there. But outside of that one, I think the big difference is, which I actually think redraft should adopt a little bit of the best ball strategy. But my favorite example is always Jameson Williams. So for like best ball, like if you've been playing fantasy last year, you know what the ceiling and floor of Jameson Williams is. Sometimes there's a 2-point game, and then other times you get a 35er. Whereas in best ball, like hopefully, like you have other people that can make up for it, and you don't have to pick to start him. So those 2-point weeks, you have another wide receiver that could step in for you. Whereas in redraft, you have to start Jameson Williams or not, and so like that's where it gets a little shaky.
And you're going to be wrong every time.
So I would say redraft, you should focus like care a little bit more about the weekly floor than you do in best ball. But at the same time, I also think that redraft players should adopt some of the best ball mindset. It's like, hey, you want guys with upside on your roster. Yeah, you got to pick to start them. Yeah, they might not be like in that upside role week one, but like the fact is like you want guys who could score the most points, and like, you know, maybe he doesn't do it weeks 1 to 6, but you know, Raheem Devon A-Chain goes down and boom, the Jalen Wright's right there for you.
But so who are some other good examples of that, right? Because you said you didn't know the Denver second wide receiver, Marvin Mims, right? But he blew up the end of the season. He probably won a lot of best ball leagues. I know you know who Marvin Mims is, obviously. But.
Yeah, I'm a Marvin Mims denier, but at 117 ADP, I think that's insane. But to your point, yeah, he is probably, who knows with Sean Payton, but logic would dictate he's the wide receiver too there right now.
But just so other guys with that is more attractive in best ball because, you know, that floor ceiling so spaced out. You said Raheem Shaheed, that's a great one.
I think George Pickens is another good example of that. I'd honestly argue Garrett Wilson's a good example. I'm scrolling through all. Debo, if it's half PPR, you know, the old Debo that we know, I think he's a good one. Jaden Reed. And then probably anyone on a crowded wide receiver room. So like the Bears, like I think every single Bear is going to run into that problem this year. And then to a lesser extent, probably the Lions too. Like we're just the skill group's so robust that ball can get spread around, which that's a conversation for a different time. But I think the league really is trying to, like, you know, spread it out as much as possible rather than it being a hyper condensed offense. I think it's harder for defenses to cover.
So for best ball, you're saying avoid those teams like Tampa. They just drafted a wide receiver, and Jalen McMillan was going to be one of my favorite targets. So they got 4 guys. Chicago's got 4 guys. Kansas City's got 4 guys. So you're saying rather than go all out, maybe take them all and hope they, you know, or just avoid it completely.
Definitely not all of them. This is somewhat of a cop-out answer, but it's all dependent on ADP. And I love that Jalen McMillan example. I think McMillan's a great example of a pure best ball rather than redraft target, because like the world where you're having to start Jalen McMillan and redraft, like unless you're in like, I'm assuming all these leagues are 12 teams.
Yeah.
By the way, I feel like that's industry standard. Where like he's always gonna have that low floor. Whereas best ball at his cost at like 150, 160, if you like him, like yeah, he could maybe get like 2-3 weeks above 15 underdog points. And like I think at a 150, 160 price tag, I think that pays off. Whereas in redraft, I don't view him as like a valuable stash. And like so I think Burden's another great example of like maybe like we haven't seen it yet, so maybe he could be it, like I talked about with those rookies, but I'm assuming come like when ESPN releases like their like official ADP whenever they do that, like July, I bet there's a lot of discrepancies in like the crowded rooms, and I bet those guys are more popular in best ball than they are on redraft like ADPs.
Okay. I'm trying to listen and think of my next question. So sometimes I just don't know because you talk so much. So I want to go back to stacks for a second. So what about my buddy Anthony, who I did best ball, we did the drafts with? He wants to write this article about these like long shot stacks. And I love that. Like, are there teams that had Brian Thomas Jr. and Mac Jones, right, last year? I mean, well, I guess Mac wasn't doing that great, but if you get like a high-end QB, are you making sure you're getting maybe, you know, the Dontavian Wicks, the Marvin Mims? I'm just trying to think of these off wide receivers who hit last year off the top of my head. Because
Pearsall.
Who?
Pearsall hit last year. He was like an odd one.
Yeah. Ricky Pearsall, Alec Pierce. But like, you know, you said it's more of a long shot than the running back making the leap, but it still does, you know, happen enough where if you get him in that 14th, 15th round and he's giving you wide receiver 30, wide receiver 40, that's going to give you probably 4 or 5 weeks of eligibility.
And I do like the later wide receivers as stack targets too. So like that's another thing related to that is like if I'm Because you can't, like, I wouldn't want to take 6 straight wide receivers. That's a little rich for my blood. So you're going to have to take, 2 to 3 after round 12, probably. And for those ones, if I can help it, I will try to throw them on a stack. That stack being, maybe I have their quarterback, maybe I have another receiver, maybe I have one of their opponents in the playoffs. Maybe I have their guys, and like that could be a stack there. So, like I said, there's a bunch of different ways. In terms of the quarterback, that's a hard question because who am I to say no? Because I think the second place team, second or third in the DK Millie Maker, had fucking Drew Lock last year during that Colts blow up.
When
So
he ran for 2, right, or something.
he had like 40. It was an insane fantasy. It wouldn't surprise me if it was like a top like 50 fantasy performance of like all time by quarterback. It was an insane blow up that he had. I can't remember exactly, but he was, I think, like 0.05% owned. He was the only guy who had Drew Lock.
Wow.
So I do think you're more than likely sacrificing some like advancement upside, and even in the playoff pods, because like, even I think Chuck's going to start all 17 games, whereas like to say you take Jackson Dart, who I might not, or Jameis Winston, we just go with him instead, who might not see the field at all. But from the game theory standpoint, like if you do 200 teams, I'm okay if you take Jameis Winston 1 to 2 times. But like I said, Drew Lock was only 0.05% owned. So even
if you're taking Jameis in those 1 to 2, are you making sure you're taking Malik on that front end?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, if I'm not taking the Jameis team, and I'm not taking the Winston team unless I have a Giants. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not taking that naked.
And what happens? So let's say you have that. It's week 15. Giants suck. Jameis starting. Are you doing cartwheels? Is that like the best moment of your life?
I would feel good. I would feel a lot better in week 17 when I have to play like 500 people opposed to 12, just because like you don't have to get as cute to beat 11 other people than you do have to beat 499 of them. But like I would still be elated to have like that type of leverage. But I would prefer for it to manifest itself in the championship week if I had a choice in the matter.
Okay. So let's the schedule just came out. Have you done your schedule deep dives already, or at least somewhat?
Yeah, I did. I pulled up or made the graphic for ETR yesterday, or helped the graphics guy make the graphic. Shout out Alex, a real one.
Okay.
So great. I do have the playoff matchups pulled up.
Okay, great. Let's talk about that's probably gonna take us 10 minutes. I just wanted one quick question. What about the variability in the rosters right now? So the one that came to mind is like we got James Cook on the Bills, right? He was, I think, RB6 last year, but they might not re-sign him. He wants $15 million a year. What do you like? So Ray Davis, right? If James Cook leaves, Ray Davis is going to be a top 20 running back. Right now, he's like top 40. Are you going out of your way in some leagues to target Davis or even Tyler Johnson?
For Cook, like I think we've learned at this point with these like holdouts that like teams most likely to sign him, unless like he's like a cancer or something, which I'm a Steelers fan, love George Pickens, still pissed off they traded him. But I've never heard anything that bad about James Cook, so my money is like they're going to give him a deal. But I still like Ray Davis just because I think I like to think he's the clear running back too there, at least the 2A, whereas Ty Johnson might be the 2B this year. Hopefully, but rooms where I would be more willing to take like the lower guys, like where like the lead back is like even without the contract, it's not necessarily as clear. So like I think the Chiefs, like it looks to be Pacheco, but like I think you could honestly make a case for any guy in that roster if he looks the best through camp that he could get a legit shot at the one spot. The Browns, like when Judkins got drafted, like he shot up, but now Sampson and like Jerome Ford are basically free, and like there's one thing I've learned throughout my time in best ball. It's that people correctly value rookies because the ceiling's there, but they also undervalue the veterans who could kind of be impacted. And I think there's a world where Dylan Sampson is the RB2 there and Jerome Ford gets completely relegated. But I think the more likely answer is like Judkins like probably pulls off at like 60-65% of the carries towards the end of like last half of the year. But Jerome Ford might get 50% of that work. People forget you have to pass block, learn protections, all that fun stuff on the actual football side. That's hard to do as a rookie, and I'm not saying they can't do that, but I do like the murkier backfields. Like
it's also smart to zag. Everyone's like after the draft, rookies are all moving up, but the value is maybe on these veterans, like maybe like Ramondre Stevenson, right? If Travion Henderson, maybe he's not that good, or maybe he gets hurt. That nobody wants these people that everyone has heard of. They want the shiny new toy.
Exactly. And, like Ramondre does have his fumbling troubles, but there might be something that Ramondre excels at more than Trevion. And, like, a coach is going to put the best guy in for each situation. And if Ramondre is the better guy to play in a certain situation, he's going to be the guy to play. And then even with the rookies that went down, like Sampson, no one loves that landing spot. Obviously, they took Judkins. Jerome Ford's already there, so that's crowded. But, like, in the 17th round, that's decent upside for, I think, a back that had a good profile, and, like, that was probably going like 130, 120 pre-draft. So, like, I think that's like the biggest correction right now is, like, rookies who had good landing spots or even like conceivably good are going up, but the ones with really bad ones are going down. And, like, if you're a good player, you could outperform your landing spot at those prices. In the 17th round, you really just have to see the damn field, and you're probably going to pay
Are you
off.
talking more running back or wide receiver overall? Because like the wide receivers, right? Or the Bears Tampa, right? Went to the crowded rooms, and we've seen in the past with like JSN, Odunze, right? What wide receivers don't really are able to jump into the field, even if they are hyper talented.
Yeah, probably more so for the running backs. Like, for the wide receivers, it would have to be like pure. Like, even for the running backs, I'm okay with like the 14th, 15th round. But like for wide receivers, like that's like McMillan's a unique example where I think he showed actual talent. He's only a sophomore, and it's good passing offense. So I'm actually a little bit more willing to
What
spend
about
like the 14th, 15th round pick on him.
what about Golden on Green Bay? Because they kind of don't have a wide receiver one, but they got all these guys who are still really good. But he's saying he might be the perfect, Christian Watson replacement with more talent.
The Packers are so. I think it was Hayden Winks of the Underdog podcast. I got this stat from the Packers wide receiver room had scored the 9th most fantasy points of a wide receiver room last year, and like you would not guess that by what the actual players outputted themselves. So the Packers one is a specific example of, like, I don't know, and I
can't even believe
think
that's true. I got to check that right now.
It's no lower than like 11th. I might have exaggerated 9.
11th. Okay. No, it's still 11th and 9th is the
Yeah,
same.
yeah. I still think it's insane. I would, if you would have told me 20, I've been like, are you sure it wasn't lower than that?
I don't even understand because Reed had like 5 straight games under 30 yards. With like Wicks, Dobson, Watson only had a few. That's crazy. That's fantasy football though.
Maybe it's on a points per game basis.
Yeah, still counts.
Yeah, but that ball, it's my argument. Tucker Kraft's the number 1 wide receiver in Green Bay. I like Jaden Reed. I don't mind Golden, but he's like slightly more expensive than Jaden Reed right now. And like, I listen to a lot of draft content, like look at stuff myself, and like follow some people I really trust. And I really didn't see anyone love Matthew Golden as a prospect. They liked him. All that him over Tet was nonsense. I can't believe that was ever a conversation. But a pick 77 in a really, really crowded wide receiver room with a coach that, really enjoys spreading the ball out, rightfully so. I think it's a great way to win football games, to not like let the defense be able to hone in on any specific thing. But it's going to be hard for them to pay off. Where I'll give Jaden Reed and Golden, though, I think they're kind of like spike week guys, where it's just like, and honestly, like there are other examples of dudes I'd rather have in best ball than redraft, because I would hate to have to pick the weeks that I start Jaden Reed and Matthew Golden this year. Now they can make me eat my words, but like current logic would dictate that being true.
I mean, yeah, Reed. We're gonna get the schedule, but yeah, Reed was crazy, right? Week 1 in Brazil, he blows up like 140 yards, couple touchdowns. Looks like boom, he's the guy. I thought it'd be Watson, and then by the time everyone,
I thought it'd be Dobbs.
Yeah, right.
And this is what I mean. Like, look, we all think it's a different guy.
And by the time everyone agreed it was Reed, that's when he was under like 25 yards for like 4 straight weeks. So it's just nuts. But fantasy football. Okay, schedule. So let's break it down for me. How important is it? How much does it change ADPs? What are you looking for in that week 15, 17? Like, is schedule stacking a thing? Break the whole, just cook.
You go on the whole schedule rant.
Yeah.
All right. So, like, to anyone listening that's not on Best Ball Twitter, I'm just going to talk like no one is on Best Ball Twitter. This is a major topic of debate in the best ball streets. I am of the opinion that it is overvalued because we have no idea what a team is going to look like in week 17 compared to week 1. Like 2 years ago, that Jets-Browns matchup, everybody hated it. That was probably, like, if you ran a poll of like all the best ball players, it would not surprise me if that was their least favorite stack for the week 17. And that ended up being the game you needed. Now, like those extremes aren't always the case, but I just think there's so much variance there. And it's also hard to project exactly what a team's going to do in week 15, 16, and 17. So what I kind of prefer is like I almost like ignore it because I'm more of a team stacker rather than like the bring back. Like some people like are obsessed with like having like the full game matchup. I'm kind of okay with having like, the Saints, but then not I think they play the Panthers maybe, but like not the Panthers. Like I'm happy to have them, but I'm not going to go out of my way. So I think you take care of the stacking just like on a team basis. And I think how much people care about the playoff schedule is slightly overrated, with the one caveat of I do value the dome games just because historical data has shown us that, dome games are historically like friendlier environments to be scoring in. So like for dome, I do value that somewhat, but and it does move ADP. I don't think it should. At least to like the way that it does, I think it's almost ridiculous that we're like, oh, like look at this guy, look who he plays in week 17. Like when you have no clue, how like everyone thought Washington's defense was going to be terrible, and then they were, and then they kind of stepped up at the end where it wasn't like like this great blow up spot that everybody thought it was 2 years ago. Everyone thought the Browns and the Jets defenses are great, and they honestly kind of were, but it didn't matter in week 17. So I think letting it dictate your decision making, I think that's suboptimal. And I think you could take care of like attacking it just through like having a team stack, which you were going to have anyway. Like, what I mean? It didn't really matter who they played. Like if you have a Panther stack, like before the schedule came out, it's the same Panther stack it always was.
Okay, what about, let's say, like Detroit, right? Last year, Detroit, they had, one outdoor game? I think that one in Chicago, November. I haven't looked at the schedule now, but if they were week 15, week 16, at Philly, at Chicago, are you avoiding Lions players? Because, the offense isn't going to perform as well on the road.
They have 2 out of 3 dome games. Maybe if it's like Tua, someone that like can't perform in cold weather historically, and like that's like a real thing, maybe then I'll be like, okay, I'll shop. But even then, like, how big's that sample size? Where like football sample, it's not baseball. Even a 1 season sample size is way too small, honestly, to like be able to put historical levels of weight on it.
And we don't even know the weather. December could still be. I'm Celsius, so still could be. A nice, warm, crisp day, right? We don't know it's going to snow, windy, rain, right? So okay.
Yeah, and it hasn't snowed in Pittsburgh on Christmas week in a while, so, or at least snow that Mag. You know the snow I'm talking about, like that Jerome Bettis, Ben Roethlisberger's like days of snow, not Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown snow.
And then even last year we had that Cleveland Pittsburgh game, right, where Jameis was lighting it up in the snow, right? So
exactly. So, but for the playoff schedule point, I'm not going to fault you for like, if it's a tiebreaker, I'm okay with you using the schedule as a tiebreaker, but I don't think you should be moving up anybody like reasonable amounts of ADP based on the schedule. But I am okay if like you're like, well, I really like what the Lions have going on in Denver. Denver's playoff schedule is brutal, and like I like both of these guys kind of the same, and they're going the same ADP. Then I'm like, okay, use it as a tiebreaker. But I think letting it dictate your decision making is a little bit too far in the weeds for my liking.
Okay, all right. We've been going 48. We're going to go about 10 more minutes. So anybody on Twitter, you can jump over to YouTube, drop Big Loaf a question if you got any, best ball pertinent questions, anything we haven't covered. But we got 10 minutes. We'll hit some more schedule, and then we'll finish with something even more exciting. So what jumped out at you for you did the schedule breakdown? Best teams, worst teams off the hump.
I really like the Panther schedule. They get New Orleans week 15 in New Orleans, Tampa, and Seattle. I'm not sold on Seattle's defense this year. I know that's like kind of a tough environment to play in, but like it's not something that scares me off too much. I like, where's my tweet? I said I like yesterday. Atlanta, they get Tampa Bay, Arizona, and the Rams, so they get like a nice Florida game on the road, and then they get 2 dome games. And then my second favorite's honestly probably Tampa, where they get Atlanta at home, then they play in Carolina, and then in Miami. But that's really not so much like weather and dome dictate, is more so it's like I think those games could be shootouts, and like
yeah, of course.
The defenses are weak, but who knows? One of those defenses could step up. Maybe if Atlanta's picks hit, those 2 first rounders they took, if they're actually like good players, like when we saw what Gerard Verse did for the Rams, like everyone thought their defense was going to be terrible, and then all of us like, I'm not going to call him an Aaron Donald replacement. Aaron Donald's like maybe the best defensive player I've ever seen, but they got a really above average player to come in and step right into like, an edge rusher role. And like that made a huge difference for them.
And stuff can shift during the season, right? The Ravens had the worst pass defense in the league, first 6 games, and then like nobody passed for more than 200 yards on them the rest of the season.
My argument for that is like, all right, so now that you bring that up, this is something that I get into a debate about all the time. The Ravens, I think, won like those first 6 weeks, I think, by like multiple possessions each game or something, except maybe like the Raiders game or something, whatever one they choked.
Yeah,
but, like,
I know
they were up.
Game, garbage time.
And teams were forced to pass on them. Yeah. And if you looked at the stats last year, all of the teams with the good point differentials just so happened to also be the teams with like the worst passing yards against. Now, is that indicative of them having a bad passing defense? Maybe. Or is indicative of the fact that, like, hey, when you're trailing the Vikings 21-0 going into the third quarter, you have to pass the ball. So I think maybe looking at it on like a per pass attempt basis is like a better way to gauge it, because like if you just look at the raw number, I think the teams with like good offenses get a little too penalized on like the real football side of them having a bad pass defense, just because like those guys are passing. Like that's what they're doing. Of course it's going to be more yards.
Okay, but then if you take Philly, same thing. They weren't giving up the garbage time yards, right?
That defense was actually sick. But they also controlled the clock too. Like, like I think there's like, I still remember when they played the series. I think they ran out a whole quarter on us. I literally think they had a ball for the whole quarter.
Yeah. They got it at the 2, and then they just kept going down the field, first down. It was the greatest thing ever.
And I think that's like a new involvement in the NFL. So I'm a little beaten path, but I love like actual football outside of fantasy. Like I love like intertwining them, and I'm definitely like a real football guy. That's one thing I think teams are learning now is you could play defense on offense. I think the Packers did a good job of that. I think the Eagles did a very good job of that. I think the Bills, the Bills.
Chiefs?
Yeah, definitely the Chiefs. If the other team doesn't have the ball, they can't score. I know you can fumble, turnover, whatever, but if you're not turning the ball over and that team doesn't have the ball, they cannot score. So, like, I think that's why running the football is kind of making a comeback, not necessarily because people realize, like, oh, like running backs are valuable, which I just do think they are. But I think it's because NFL teams realized after Kyle Shanahan blew a 28-3 lead because he kept passing the damn ball in the fourth quarter. I think like something changed and teams realized like, oh damn, we can control the clock here. Like if we don't give them the ball, they can't score. And it's true. And like I think it's all like the Chiefs got blown out in the Super Bowl, but everyone shit on their point differential last year. But I also thought some of that was because like, well, they're not trying to run up the score. They're trying to control the ball. So I think that honestly is like a new metric I want to start looking at for great. NFL teams is like % of possession for each game.
But so this is great because this is one thing I want to talk about. We have these great teams, but they're also not great fantasy teams because they're not trying to drop 40, right? They're just trying to win by a field goal, but have the ball at the end. So like, do we now avoid Philly, Buffalo, these Chiefs, these offenses that are historically great, have all these weapons, but they're not getting the touchdowns, the explosive plays, or the high scoring games?
This is a great question. I love this question. So like there's the teams like the Bengals where it works out perfectly, where their defense sucks and their offense is great, and like that's the perfect storm. That's like the like projected as of now, like the Tampas, the Bengals, the Panthers, I think. But not only do I think like, yeah, I think those teams aren't trying like to force the issue, because like you remember in like that 2015, 2020 era, like the EPA numbers started taking off, like that was a big thing, and like teams like, oh, we're supposed to pass the ball more, so they let it rip at all times. Whereas now,
before the too high, right?
Yeah, now they're toning it down. And so not only do I think like, the really good teams are trying to win with like ball possession, but the market is pricing up the good team, the players from the good team. So like, it's like almost a double negative. There was like, yeah, I think they're like, I have Jalen Hurts as like my QB, like 7 or 8. It's not anything that I don't like him, but like he's not going to have to pass. And the devil magic of them getting tackled on the one cannot last forever, I think.
What about the tush push potentially getting banned?
That has nothing to do with my projection, but if it did get banned, I would bump him down a little more. But my projection being what it is I think the Eagles defense is amazing, and I think that like, they're not going to have a lot of reason to try to push it. And like, so with that being the case, and then also like the draft capital, like who does Devonta Smith go? And I love Devonta Smith as a talent. It's like I love real football and I love fantasy, and sometimes it's different. But Devonta Smith's going over the likes of like Calvin Ridley, who's a real wide receiver one, Chris Olave, real wide receiver one, Jacoby Myers. And that's not to say like I hate Devonta Smith, but like I don't think Devonta Smith should go 30 picks higher than Jacoby Myers, whose team's probably have a worse defense. It's going to have to pass more. And also, Jacoby Myers is, I know Bowers is like the real number one target, but he's the number one wide receiver there.
Yeah, usage and opportunity, right? Yeah, I love Devonta Smith. He's a monster, but I mean, you're going to pass for 180 yards, and AJ's going to get 90 of them. That's not a lot of meat there that he's got to hit.
Yes, I really like that you brought it up. So yeah, I am, and it was a mistake I definitely made last year of like my logic was like, just take the guys on good teams. Now, before I go into that, running backs on good teams are still a thing. That's actually where you implement that logic, in my opinion, is the running backs, but not the whole team. Because like we're talking about, the good teams control the game with the running backs. Therefore, take the running back. But I did that for every position, and it really bit me in the ass because I ended up with a lot of like Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, wide receiver twos on perceived good off. Now the Dolphins are inverse, and they just ended up sucking, and it wasn't anything to do with them being too good. But I absolutely think the market is overpricing players on good teams, but they still have weekly ceilings, so there are times where I'm willing to pay. But I think more importantly, they're undervaluing the players on perceived bad teams, because like it's the kind of like the opposite of like, hey, they're gonna have to. What do you think they're gonna do? Just like hand the ball off and kill clock when they're down 17 points halfway through the third quarter? Like, no, they're gonna have to air it out, and if they're proactive, they'll start airing it out earlier because they understand that like, hey, like our defense isn't that good. And our offense isn't great either, so we have to pass the ball to stay in this game. And I think last year, like a lot of the higher advance rate teams, were the cheaper ones overall, just because like there was so much less they had to do to pay off. So I kind of look at it as like low risk, high upside, and maybe low risk, medium upside, because those like Daniels, Seahawks examples are kind of not a dime a dozen. But like they're probably, if a team's getting projected as the 32nd best offense and they're priced that way, there's a good chance they're going to be valued, because like they're going to have to be the absolute worst in the league not to pay off. So even if they're 27th best, they're going to pay off.
Sometimes the Pats, right? We're supposed projected to be bad, and we're bad, right? Let's talk about the Pats. But how much longer do I got you for?
We're good. I said hard out 1:30, so we got time. I'm enjoying this. So like, when you need to get off, you get off. But like, we definitely don't need to get off here in 3 minutes.
Great. Okay. Cool. So let's go. I want to. We'll talk about some specific teams. So give me like your dream best ball, right? Let's say it's $1,000 buy-in, $1 billion pot. Like I know you got to go how it dictates, but like what's it? Your best guy at each spot, just quickly.
All right. So round one.
Yeah.
Let me sort this by ADP. I get through this in probably less than 3 minutes. Round one, my dream's probably getting like the 9 or 10 spot and getting Malik Neighbors. I'm very excited to see what he could do. Like, well, obviously, if I had any choice of anybody, I'd take Jamar. But that also means I have to have the number one pick.
I'm surprised you take Neighbors but with the dart potential. But okay, Neighbors first round, boom.
So I like Neighbors. I think his like weekly upside, like if he has just even a confident quarterbacks there. Round two, I'm real big on starting double wide receiver, as we talked about earlier. You need the wide receivers to like get through those pod weeks. So I'm probably like leaning towards wide receiver again there.
Who?
My dream would be Brian Thomas falling a little bit, like a few picks past, like one pick past ADP. Go Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas.
So you're going double sophomore wide receiver stack without a quarterback. So you don't really care. So for me, it's like I'm not doing that, but you're the expert. So
I would say all that, but like this is my head. So third round. Now this would also kind of depend on who was there for me, but in like a dream scenario at pick like 30, I'm taking Josh Jacobs. Great wide running back one on a good team. It's going to pass. And then hopefully I could get Ted McMillan on the way back. And then I would go Joe Mixon.
So veteran running backs, even though the Houston might be good, O-line sketchy.
Yeah, he did good with the bad O-line, so I like, and especially like I think it's like a draft cost thing there for me. Like I think Joe Mixon should probably be about a third round pick. So if you're giving me through the fifth, I'm going to sing a little bit of a different tune where he's currently going. Like if he's in the third round, it'd be different for me. But like I'm definitely a very big value hunter. So after that, then if I got extremely lucky, I would probably go Alvin Kamara and that way
Okay.
I have three backs. Right, it's three, right? I have Mixon.
Yep.
Yeah, so my three backs are locked up, so I go all 0 RB targets. Then I'm probably going Jacoby Myers.
So you have it. You are just a pure value base because nobody wants Jacobs, Mixon, Kamara on the surface, right? Older running backs, right? So, but it's there's still
And for there, like that's
studs.
like advanced too. So like if I take those guys early, now there are younger guys I could take early, but I'm shaky on their workload. But like with that team, which I go through the whole one if we want, I would stop at taking like actual like expensive running backs with real draft capital there. And then after that, I would be targeting like Ramondre's, like Dylan Sampson types, DJ Giddens, like the 0 RB ones where it's like okay, like my three running backs that are going to get me points are locked in. Now what I want to do is because again, I'm operating under the assumption that they're all healthy all year.
Yeah.
That's what you need to do in best ball. And I'm going to try to attack some upside guys later on. Whereas if I don't take two running backs, like I like having at least two through the top like 80 ADP right now. That way I could like not have to like keep hammering like volume backs in like the later rounds.
So
And
you're shooting the moon, and I noticed we don't have a QB or tight end yet. So keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
no, you're
That's
good.
what
You're
I did.
good. All right. So after that, I'm probably going. So I took Jaden Reed. The dream scenario now is probably. See, I don't love this range. I would go Jaden Higgins or Michael Pittman here. Right after that, I'm going Rashid Shaheed. So what I have Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Jacoby Myers, Jaden Reed, and Rashid Shaheed. So I'm probably okay. Like I'll probably take one wide receiver in like the late rounds, but like I'm probably okay stopping for a minute. And now, so here I am in like this fun range. So like you said, I don't have like tight ends or quarterback, which is correct. So here, like I'm probably going Evan Ingram, Tucker Kraft, or Isaiah Likely.
So
And then
let's say you have this team. What? No, yeah, I love all those guys. What are you thinking for QB? Are you looking to get Trevor Lawrence to stack with Brian Thomas? Looking to get Russell Wilson to stack with Neighbors? What's your mindset?
yeah, I'm probably going T-Law or Jordan
T-Law.
Love here. I don't love the Giants QB situation right now. I'd rather just run the naked neighbors and then do a stack elsewhere. Also, like there would be the world where I would swap out my Jaden Higgins, Michael Pittman with Justin Fields instead. Where then like I said, like if you have a rushing quarterback, don't think you have to worry about the stacking as much, and I could kind of like ease my mind there and like okay, like I don't need to take care of a stack. But yeah, T-Law or Jordan Love, because then we only take Tucker Kraft or Njoku. And now we're getting to that like weird range. So like I like Tank Bigsby. I think he's getting written off a little too hard as like the like obvious running back 3 there. I think there's a world where he's the running back 1, and I really don't think there's a world where he's the running back 3. So I think the market's like he looked good last year after like one of the worst rookie seasons we've ever seen from a running back. But I thought he looked good. I thought he showed he could play football last year. And after this range, it's more so just like, okay, so any running back that has some upsides, like Braylon Allen, if he might have some standalone value, or Breece Hall goes down, Rico Dowdle, if Chuba Hubbard goes down, Roshan Johnson might have standalone, or if DeAndre Swift goes down, Dylan Sampson. And then Jawan Johnson, I know like I'm skipping around now with the
That's
later
right.
rounds. Like I said, like with the later rounds, I don't let ADP dictate as much. But like if Evan Ingram is my first tight end, I'm absolutely leaving my draft with Jawan Johnson if I could help it. I think he is probably like the best 18th round value right now. That is going to produce for you week 1. Obviously, there might be a running back there that could step into a RB1 role later on. But in terms of like what they could do for me week 1, I think Jawan Johnson's my favorite last round pick.
Okay, cool. So so you got that team. You think that's kind of but what you're going after, right? Wide receivers early, value running backs, and then just filling in the onesie positions late because there's only one of each, right?
Yeah, like I think the easy way to phrase it, like through the first 4 rounds, like I still like Lamar and Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels just because I don't have to stack and they have like great upside. But in a perfect world, like if I was gonna die if my team didn't like make a finals,
I love
like
it.
if I was like literally gonna die, I'm probably starting 4 running backs and 4 wide receivers. Not in that order, obviously, but through my first 8 picks, I'm like I said earlier, they're the positions that you have to start the most of every single week. And the ones that you can start the most of any given week, I just don't understand why, we wouldn't be like, like I kind of want more of the position that I have to start more of every week to be viable for fantasy producers, rather than like, God bless all my friends who do this, but you'll catch me dead before you see me going Brock Bowers and Trey McBride in the same draft. I'll be dead.
I saw someone did that. Yeah, they did the tight end stack at the end. So that's also something I want to ask you about the flex, right? Is there some position that you want to see in there that would dictate that your team's doing well? Like if your tight end if you have a tight end in that flex spot, that probably means it's probably not going that well for you.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Like overall, like the whole season, obviously, like there might be 1 week when Njoku scores 18 and Hunter Henry scores like 15 and a half. But in a perfect world for me, it's a running back. Just because like the higher floor, like overall the whole season, like there might be 1 week where the wide receiver spike and like he ends up hitting the flex. But like in the perfect world of like my average output, I would like it to be the running back, just because like they just outscore. They outscore more. You know what I mean? Like the running back. I think it was something like the running back outside of like Jamar Chase. I think there was like 12 running backs that outscored Justin Jefferson as the wide receiver too, or something last year. It was something in half PPR. It was something nuts. But outside of Chase, it was you basically wanted running back every time.
Yeah, but that's just how that year went, right? It's just you're never gonna have that with wide receivers again, right? With Tyreek,
I don't know, man. I think the league is shifting towards this clock control approach. I think they're also shifting towards more of like spreading out the rock if they could help it. Now it's a little different if you're elite like Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase are like, so that's a different story. But like for those like tweeners, like who's good, like Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, Jordan Addison, Jameson Williams. I don't know. Like metas change all the time, about every 5 years, and we're about, this will be going on the 4th year of the, here, let me pull up the data. This will be the 4th year, I believe, of like this heavy shift towards running the ball. Let's see. Yeah, so for the last 4 years, passing yards per game, 2021 it was 244, 2022 234, 2023 236, and 2024 217.
Wow.
So like now that's like of like the top 50 fantasy quarterbacks where I got that data from. So those numbers might be off by like a yard or two, but like it's still, it's within the range where like that number is like not, like, hey, why are you telling me this is a number when it's not? So I do think we're due for like a we're gonna hit the bottom here soon on the passing yard issue, just because like the league's just not gonna go one way forever, to the point of like, oh, like the way this is going, we're gonna have 140 passing yards a game in like 2030. It's just like not how it works, but I don't see it changing heavy this year. So it's hard for me to like look at, how the passing game numbers have trended. I think there's like 2 less plays per game than there was in like 2020. So like everything that like benefits wide receiver output and passing game output has just been like, do we cuss on the show?
Yeah.
You're getting kicked in the dick. And I just don't see a reason that this year is going to be the massive turnaround. Like I don't know why that would be the case.
Okay. Yeah, Mahomes is kind of like the microcosm for that, right? He blows up in 2019, whatever year, right? 50 touchdowns, and then you've just seen his kind of yards per completion just go down, right? He was 300 a game, and now he's 230, 240.
Yeah, and it's like, again, like, guess what? Like a 5-yard pass has a higher rate of completion than a 12-yard pass does. And fun fact about first downs, it only takes 10 yards to get them. So if you could lock in 5 yards every play, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want it? Like, which that's hard. It's like, it's hard to like sustain that. But if you have a good scheme that can, like, I don't know why you wouldn't try to clock the ball and control it. So like there's a bunch of wide receivers that got hurt last year, so I think they'll be better from I was actually late to the pre-show because I was arguing with Davis Maddox. He tried to say like only 2 running backs were on IR in the top 100 ADP last year, but 33% of the wide receivers were.
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys know about IR or not, but it's 21 days. So basically 3 to 4 games is like, well, if you just say miss 3 games, it's 33% of the running backs in the top 100 missed 3 games, and 43% of the wide receivers missed at least 3 games. So I think that wide receiver number will come down a little bit, but like I would love passing to go up. Like it would make my life a little bit easier trying to justify taking wide receivers that I don't love just to keep up with like the capital spent on them. But like, there's just no like indicator that I could really point towards. Like, this is going to be the year that we rebound towards like 250. And what was the highest in this? Well, let me see. So in the last 10 years, the most passing yards a game was 2015 with 259. So we're over 40 yards down from that high. What is that's like 25% or something from like the high of the past like 11 years now, I guess. But
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you feel watching the games, but you feel if you're making prop bets and it's like you got your quarterback over at 260, and then end of three quarters he's at 170. You're gonna need those 2 minute drive passing drives. All right, we're gonna wrap up, but give me your last year, your biggest sweat in best ball, like week 17, whatever. Like what was the thing that broke you or made you cashed out on?
yeah, we'll stick with broke. We'll stick with the pain. That week 15, it's so brutal, man, because it's 1 out of 12 advance. It might be 1 out of 30. What to say 1 out of 12 because I know that's 8%. So if you advance, 100 teams, which you're not gonna do. If you do, you're like actually like the best advancing guy, like maybe of all time. Math would dictate that you're gonna advance 8 teams to the second round. 8. And so like that first round, which is also why like I'm a total points guy, because like the sweat's never truly over. Like you might not be in like the running for first anymore, but like you're also just you're not sitting there with no teams in week 16
Put all the
watching all your friends sweating stuff while you're there, just like I hate you guys. I'm miserable, you're having fun. Like misery loves company. So like that is like, please get ready for that. This is your first year. Like you're like, oh my god, I did 50 teams, I advanced 16 of them. I'm amped. You're gonna advance one team probably. One.
Yeah,
now
yeah.
that also depends if you have like a bunch of like the guys who go off. You might advance none, but like it's you go from having buckets of fantasy teams down to what you could count on one hand, and it's hard to stomach. It definitely is, and it's also why I'm a big believer in like the total point format because I think it's a better it's a better experience for people. It's not fun if you have not played best ball. You're not going to have a good time week 15 either. Even when you advance the team, whatever you do, you're going to be greedy, and it's not going to feel like you did good enough. So even if it goes well, you're still probably going to be bad.
Okay, what happened?
Oh, I didn't have any Mike Evans or Devontae Adams last year. I had the 8th lowest advancing team be my like of every team that advanced to the second week. I had the 8th lowest one get to the second round, and like that team was garbage. So I got blown out of the water. So like I had like I maxed. So what would that be? I lost probably like $3,000. Like that was not fun. Fun fact, not fun. Yeah. But that's if you want to experience best ball for all its glory, I would suggest doing the cheapest entries possible. Don't worry about BBM. It's okay that you're not going to win $2 million. You probably weren't going to win it anyway. Dabble in it, because there's a $2 contest on drafters. There's a $3 one on underdog. You could spend. Would that be that's a 300 and then 450? You can spend $750 and have 300 fantasy teams. Like, and you can do less. You can spend $300 and have whatever that be. That cut in half. I forgot what number I said. I'm doing a lot of on the fly math. So like that would be my biggest suggestion. Anyone getting in, do as many teams as you want, but please try. I would keep them to the cheapest entry fees possible. And like there's upside there. The $2 drafters is $10K at first. The mini schnauzer on underdog right now, $3 entry. I think it's either 50 or 100K to first. I think the 20 max $3 on DraftKings is currently 100K to first. So you have a lot of like fun options that have high payouts, but like you're probably going to lose. Even if you're good, you're probably going to lose. It's just so variance riddled. So like I just don't want any like you could be amazing. Like you could be way smarter than me and John combined times 5. And you're still more likely to lose money every year than you are to win. So, like, operate with that in mind.
But what a ride, though.
Yeah, it's a fun experience. Like, but also, guess what? When your guy that you have 30% of gets hurt week 2, whoo! Oh, baby. I had 34% Isaiah Likely. I was so amped that week 1 game in that last play.
Even when he didn't get the touchdown?
Well, I thought he died. I thought he died on the field. I thought like we weren't going to get to see it, but like that feeling of like an hour before I figured out he was okay. Not even because then he came back in, but I was worried. But yeah, like that if you have any takeaway from this, screw all like the data I gave you, all the advice on like actually playing it. If you're playing, Do as many teams as you want, but also for the littlest amount of money possible. I know I'm an underdog partner. When they don't like you saying, when these gambling companies probably don't want me saying, hey, like tell people to spend less money. It is within your best interest. I think you'll have a funner time. I think the loss won't hurt as bad. And you could also still win a ton of money. You still win six figures for less than $1,000.
And you're also not going to, because that's how it works.
Yeah, you're not going to win. Yeah, you're not. If you want to bet me that you'll win, I will bet against you. You just slide in my DMs on Twitter. I'll say you will not win a first place team. I'll take all the bets all day. You want me to.
All right. So this is great. So everyone, follow us Bluesky and Twitter at Ethos Fantasy NFL. Subscribe to the YouTube Sports Ethos YouTube channel. Subscribe to all the Fantasy NFL Today podcasts. I'll have somebody on next week. Big Loaf, this is great. Where should people find you? I saw you got a Substack. What's the best way?
You can find me Big Loaf on Twitter. That's where I'm most active. You want to subscribe to the Substack, you can. If you don't want to, I don't really care. But like, if you want to, I tweet more content than I put in the Substack these days. I found that to be a easier distribution method. So at Big Loaf _fantasy. If you look up Big Loaf and I'm not the first thing that comes up at this point, I'm gonna be pissed.
This is great. So I had fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I think everyone learned a lot. Let's definitely do a draft later in the summer because I think that'd be fun.
Absolutely.
I remember you said you didn't like doing it, but we'll do it anyways.
Oh yeah, like I don't mind it. If I were you guys, I wouldn't want to join drafts with people. Like I have a group chat with buddies that are really sharp and they love being in lobbies together. It's like I don't want to play against good people. No, if you're drafting, I'm going to go out of my way to not draft while you're drafting. Actually,
is there a strategy? Maybe draft Friday night at midnight and people are drunk. Like I know people used to do that with poker.
I do think that the later hours, the really late PMs, basically think of when would be the worst time for a father of two to be drafting and draft during those times. That would be my advice.
Cool, man. All right, this is dope. We went longer than we thought, but you still got probably what did we cover? Like 4% of your best ball knowledge?
Yeah, we could have a high level one at some point if you want, but yeah, I could rant and rave. We didn't talk about ceiling weeks and all that. Yeah. There's still a lot left there.
This was high level for me. All right, guys. We'll see you next week.